Good morning and welcome back to Retro Adventures. This is my fifth and final day following the Lewis and Clark Trail. I'm in North Dakota, close to the state capital. And behind me you can see the statue of Sacagawea and her son Jean-Baptiste. I don't have to tell you that know about Lewis and Clark, the important role she played in the trail all the way to the Pacific and back to North Dakota. And of course, North Dakota was, or the area of North Dakota known today, was where they found Toussaint Charbonneau and his wife Sacagawea to help with this journey. And this is the outside of the North Dakota state capitol. It's quite a different site than other state capitals. It is built in the style of Art Deco. I believe it was built in 1933. I'm sure most all of you know that Sacagawea was probably a teenager when she went with Lewis and Clark. She gave birth as Lewis and Clark were camping with the Mandan people. She originally was a Shoshone Indian, but kidnapped by the Hidatsa. And she was one of two wives of Toussaint Charbonneau. At least that's what most historians believe. I'm currently on the 18th floor of the state capital of North Dakota. This is the observation area, and you can see in the distance there the Missouri River, where Lewis and Clark traveled up probably about another 30 miles before wintering at Fort Mandan. And once again, you can see the Missouri River in the distance. This is quite a view from this 18th floor. So here in North Dakota, they really celebrate the legacy of Sacagawea. This is the Sacagawea room. Appears to be a room where legislators and other members meet. And here we have more example of the Art Deco style of this building. I just learned from information that the first capital of North Dakota burned, and its building originally also served as the capital of the Dakota Territory. And then this one, as I have already said, was built in 1933. Welcome to Keelboat Park here in Bismarck, North Dakota. Behind me you see a replica of a keelboat, and we're going to be looking at some other information here about the Lewis and Clark ventures and their stop here at present-day Bismarck. I've seen several examples of these replica keelboats throughout my Lewis and Clark journeys. Of course, the one in St. Charles is seaworthy. There's one close to Wood River, Illinois, that is cut in half that shows you ways in which they might have been packed. Of course, the keelboat was sent back down to St. Louis after the winter in April of 1805, packed with all sorts of things that, of course, Thomas Jefferson wanted to learn, including a couple of prairie dogs. Only one made it, and some magpies. I believe 4 of those Thomas Jefferson had as a pet. One of those magpies for many years, I understand. So Lewis and Clark would have passed along here in October of 1804, shortly before getting to the Mandan village. This is I-94 that goes across this park, and we have a paddle boat in the distance there. I always find it quite ironic that if the Lewis and Clark expedition had waited another 15 to 18 years, they could have taken a paddle boat up the Missouri, although that would have been quite treacherous because the Missouri was very, very dangerous. Of course, when they went, Thomas Jefferson commissioned them to go in 1803, completed their journey in 1806. So here we have the Missouri River again, obviously dammed up at this point. Quite a bit has changed since Lewis and Clark passed this way in October of 1804. And you can see that this boat is called the Lewis and Clark. I believe in the summer they do give rides on this up and down the Missouri River, obviously dry docked right now. Welcome to the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center close to Washburn, North Dakota. You see the sculpture behind me which depicts a scene from the winter of 1804-1805. This sculpture captures a chance encounter between Sheheki and the captains outside the gate of Fort Mandan, months after he promised that if they, meaning his tribe, shall eat, then the men shall eat. But if his tribe starves, then the men shall starve. If it wasn't for the generosity of the Mandan people and the Native Americans there that winter, the Corps of Discovery might not have survived. This is called the Buffalo Walk. People who have contributed to this museum and are put on these buffalo sculptures. So here I am in the interpretive center of the Lewis and Clark expedition here in Washburn.
I could but esteem this moment of my departure as among the most happy of my life. Departed in excellent health and spirits, zealously attached to the enterprise, and anxious to proceed. Not a whisper of murmur or discontent to be heard among them. But all accuracy to be entered distinctly and intelligibly for others as well as yourself. In 1802, President Jefferson formed
Some of the books that inspired the Corps of Discovery. Here are some examples of the instruments that were used. Of course, all of these are replicas. Here's a model of Meriwether Lewis writing in his journals. Of course, other members wrote journals. Patrick Gass, I believe, was one of the first to publish his journal ahead of Meriwether Lewis's, of course, which was delayed after his death. Here are some examples of some of the gifts that were handed out to the Native Americans while they were going up and down the river. The information on this wall reminds us that for the first 600 miles, Lewis and Clark did not encounter a Native American.
Despite the arduous voyage, these objects permitted temporary relief simple pleasures, and amusement. As part of a military expedition, the soldiers of the Corps of Discovery were required to shave at least once every 3 months. Firearms were essential to the Lewis and Clark expedition. They were used to hunt for food, to collect natural history specimens, and to provide protection. The repair kit represents the continual maintenance of firearms, small and large, during the journey. Meriwether Lewis purchased an air rifle with his own money at Harper's Ferry while purchasing supplies for the expedition. It was mentioned 39 times in the journals, more than any other of the expedition's weapons. The air rifle was a .46 caliber weapon and resembled a Kentucky rifle. An air reservoir was located within the butt, which, when fully pumped, could fire a rifle ball with the same velocity as powder.
In order to charge the reservoir with 800 psi, they had a pump that looks very much like a modern bicycle pump. They screwed that into the base of the buttstock reservoir, put it between their feet on the ground, and pumped it 1,500 times, which took about a half an hour. In order to load the rifle, they had an extra speed loader, and the bolts simply rolled right in, closed the magazine, the Giardoni rifle had a spring on the side here, and this spring allows the breech mechanism, which slides to load a ball. And so when Lewis was ready to fire, he would simply move the gun like this, pull back the hammer, and when Lewis arrived at a council with the Indian chiefs, he would be in a formal uniform, as would his men. The gun would be preloaded and pre-charged, and he would fire it time after time, and it would seemingly have no end of shots, and this was considered by the Indians to be great medicine. The original Lewis air rifle was discovered in Dr. Beeman's air rifle collection and is on display at Carlisle War College. Gun historians today consider this rifle to be perhaps the most important rifle in American history, and yet it never killed anyone.
So I actually misspoke yesterday in the video. Lewis and Clark actually spent a total of 215 days in what is present-day North Dakota, and 156 of these days were near Fort Mandan. I'm at the Fort Mandan Visitor Center. It's not open until a couple of weeks from now. However, I am delighted to find out that they are giving tours of the fort, and that's what I'm here for. I'm here at the replica of Fort Mandan, close to the Interpretive Center. It's my understanding there's going to be a tour around 12 o'clock. I don't see a tour guide here yet. It's also my understanding this is not the exact spot that this fort would have been. Someone yesterday told me that the actual spot was where the lake now is. The first thing I observe as I see this replica is how incredibly small it is. But if you think about it, with only about 45 men, it would have been adequate. It's also incredible to think about how cold it got that winter. Meriwether Lewis states in one of his journals that The thermometer indicated that it was 74 degrees below the freezing point, which would have been about 40 degrees below zero. Here we have a reenacted area of the blacksmith shop. The plaque over there states how the Native Americans must have been just fascinated by the men who were able to forge metal into tools and weapons.
So I heard you mention to Kit that this is your last spot that you had to visit?
It is, yes.
And now you've done the whole thing?
No. Here we have an example of the quartering for the soldiers. Wow, this is neat. Well, looks like this might have been the room of Pierre Creuset, the man who played the fiddle. Obviously mistakes were made, like that iron boat that didn't quite work out.
You know, if you're trying to live off of the land where you are, it's hard to gauge what you need versus what you have. Time when they were conversing with people. The other interpreter they had was a gentleman by the name of René Jasson. He was also a French-Canadian fur trader. He was married to a woman from the Mandan villages. So between the two of them, they were able to speak with almost all of their neighbors, which is, they knew they were going to have to be doing weaponry repair, manufacturing tools and hinges and whatever else they might need.
Once again, here I am at Fort Mandan. I've been given just a fascinating tour of all of the rooms and the men who lived here by Bethany. She was a great tour guide. If you get a chance, make sure you come here and listen to what the rangers have to say, because they're very knowledgeable about everything here at the fort. And here's the statue of Seaman, the dog of Meriwether Lewis that made the trek all the way to the Pacific and back. I guess this is called Seaman Overlook. And there it is, Missouri River. I was talking to Bethany earlier. That replica is not in the exact spot. It is unknown exactly where Fort Mandan was, but it was probably about 12 miles farther up the river than this replica is. This is a grove of cottonwood trees, which is what the fort would have been made of. That replica fort is made of cottonwoods, and it's been standing for about 50 years. The tour guide back at Fort Mandan suggested that I come here to Knife Village Historic Site and see some of the replica houses and the village here. So here I am. So one of the questions I had answered today, I often wondered whatever happened to the Mandans that the Lewis and Clark expedition stayed with during that winter. Well, it so happens that in 1837, a devastating smallpox epidemic came through after a boat, the St. Peter's from St. Louis, was carrying smallpox, and about 95% of the Mandan people were wiped out because of that epidemic. So here's an example of an earthen lodge, similar to the ones I saw at On a Slant Village. However, this one I get to go inside of. Fire would be in the middle, and up above was a hole for the smoke to escape. This one is recreated very nicely. I'm going to go ahead and record this ending inside because the wind is really picking up outside. It's turning a little colder. And this is the last stop on my Lewis and Clark journeys. I'm a little sad it's coming to an end, but I am very grateful that I've been able to do this over the last 5 days. And thank you for coming along with me. Once again, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, share it with all your friends, subscribe, and I'll continue to be making content. And until next time, have yourself a retro adventure.